Starting a new job is always a mix of excitement and nerves. When I landed a summer job at a local carnival in Midtown Miami, I was just looking for some extra cash before my senior year of college. The carnival was a typical setup with rides, games, and food stands, but its main attraction was the funhouse, which doubled as a haunted house after dark. It was a solid structure that I think used to be some old mansion. I was assigned to manage the funhouse, a favorite among the carnival goers. It seemed simple enough. Guide the guests in, ensure they have a fun and safe time, and watch them leave. At first, everything seemed straightforward, but then I started noticing odd things. It started with small discrepancies. I'd count a dozen people entering, but only 11 would emerge. At first, I chalked it up to miscounting. After all, keeping track in the chaos of laughter and screams was no easy task. However, as the days passed, the numbers just didn't add up. 7 went in, 6 came out, 10 went in, 9 came out. Was I going crazy? Something was off, and I couldn't ignore it much longer. One particularly busy afternoon, a blonde girl caught my eye as she walked up to the funhouse. She was drop-dead gorgeous and almost seemed out of place amidst the childlike atmosphere. She couldn't have been more than a few years older than me. I genuinely had to do a double take. I'm not a weird guy by any means, but I couldn't help but lock eyes with her for a few seconds. She smiled, handed me her ticket, and I directed her into the attraction. After she disappeared into the darkness, I went back to my duties. Time ticked by and I watched attentively as people entered and exited, sometimes asking me questions. Admittedly, I was paying a little more attention to the guests that night as I wanted to see that girl as she left and maybe work up the courage to talk to her. I moved through the house until I came across something I had noticed during my initial walkthrough, a barely noticeable seam in the wall. I'm not really sure what I was expecting, but curiosity got the best of me. I pressed against the seam and heard a distinct click. I played around with it some more and my jaw nearly hit the floor when I realized it was a hidden door. It swung open slowly, revealing a pitch-black hallway. I stood there in shock. What in the world was this doing here? I was definitely going to have a long conversation with my boss about this. The smell only got worse as I climbed down into the darkness. I was expecting to find a basement, but what I found instead was far, far worse. I got to the bottom and pulled out my phone's flashlight. I was frozen in shock. I was literally standing in a tunnel that extended into the darkness. There was no way this was part of the house above. The rational part of my brain screamed to turn back, to forget about it, but the mystery was too compelling. I ventured further, being careful not to make any noise. The walls were damp and the tunnel was completely silent. As I explored, my flashlight beam fell on something unexpected, a white glittery purse sitting in the middle of the corridor. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It looked familiar and then it hit me. It was that girl's purse. I was sure of it. I started to panic. Was she really down here? I doubted there was any way a rational person could find this tunnel and not turn around, but the proof was literally in my hands. My mind started racing. Was she hurt, lost? And then a more terrifying thought hit me. Was she alone? I didn't feel safe anymore, but I was in too deep. I braced myself for a fight, and then a voice rang out, a girl's voice. Her voice. She gasped, "Help me," clutching her side as if in pain. I yelled at her to climb up, but she insisted that I follow her back into the darkness for some reason. I told her there was no chance I was doing that and basically forced her up the ladder. We got to the top and I slammed the door shut. I asked her how in the world she ended up down there and she couldn't really give me a straight answer. She kept saying she didn't really remember how it happened, just that she suddenly realized she was underground. She said she started hearing things moving in the dark and that there were voices calling to her. I didn't know how to process this. I asked her if someone had guided her down there and she said she didn't remember. The weirdest thing about her story was that she was looking at me with this blank stare that genuinely freaked me out. I basically interrogated her about why she told me to stay down there, but she didn't answer. I had had enough. I wanted to get as far away from this person as possible. I called the police, but she opted to leave the funhouse before they got there. The police investigated, and what they found was actually insane. Apparently this house had been some sort of safe house during Prohibition in the 1920s. As such, it had a bunch of secret passageways that led to a section of the underground Prohibition tunnels that hadn't been discovered. The owner claimed he had no idea about the house's history, but I was skeptical. I quit my job and got as far away from there as possible. I still have so many questions. Did the owner know about this? Was that girl almost kidnapped? Had someone knocked her out and taken her down there or something? Was she part of the whole thing? I feel like there are a number of explanations for what happened to me, but all of them are equally terrifying.